Well, we're talking in this particular chapter, chapter 7, about external recruiting, and in the sequence of our course, it doesn't necessarily make sense if we're just reading the textbook from start to finish, which is the way we typically read books. We start on page 1 and we read to page 500. In this class, we are jumping around a little bit because there are pieces of chapters that make more sense in the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish. And there's a piece of chapter 7 that is important to understand early on. And for that reason, we don't spend a lot of time in chapter 7, but we do try to hammer this concept home. And we'll talk about that as we get into this particular lecture. Let's get started here. It's about recruiting, and in particular, external recruiting, understanding that recruiting is the process of getting people to apply once they know about our jobs. We can either get people to apply who already work for us, that's internal recruiting, or we can get people from outside the organization to apply, and that's external recruiting. As a reminder, recruiting is the process of engaging in efforts to hire the right people to help us achieve our goals and build a competitive advantage. And as we said in chapter 1 in the video, we can't just hope that they show up. We can't believe that our company and our job and our product and our service and all that kind of stuff is so great that people are going to be lined up at the door, banging on the door, trying to get in. That just doesn't happen in the real world, especially when there are options for people. They're looking for the best option. We got to convince them that we are the best option, but that doesn't happen if they don't know about us. So once we get them to know about us, which is sourcing, then when we've sparked an interest, we try to pull them in to come apply and to come through the process to get a job. So it's the efforts that we go through to try to get people to apply for our jobs and to then hire them to help us to do the things that we're trying to accomplish. So we might also say that recruiting is the series of interactions between a candidate and various members or representatives of our organization that build to that hiring decision. And that's important to understand for one real reason that comes to mind right now, and that is that it's not just HR that is involved in recruiting. All of us are involved in recruiting. Your employees are involved in recruiting. They might not ever formally interview a candidate, but if that candidate comes to our office and wanders through the building to get to our office's managers, they will see our employees, and the degree to which our employees look like they enjoy being there and they're friendly and they're happy and so forth, sets the first impression on our candidates that, hey, this place may be a place that I'd be interested in. You know, these people look nice. These people look like they like each other. They talk to each other. They're laughing. That's a great environment. That's part of recruiting because it's an interaction with the candidate. Our managers who bring them into their offices. You know, one of the first things that you do when you walk into somebody's office is you kind of sit down and you kind of look around the room. So the way that we organize our offices and decorate our offices and those kinds of things set a first impression. The way that we interact with people and smile at them and shake their hand and call them by name and show respect to them sets an interaction expectation. There are HR people who call them, you know, how nice we are on the phone and how polite we are when it comes to setting up appointments. And, oh, you're busy that day. Great, we can work around that. We're really here for you. We want to get to know you. Sets an expectation and impression. So recruiting is that series of interactions. It may be that 10 or 12 different people interact with a candidate or touch a particular candidate in terms of their interaction with them, and all of those things go into some formula that is being built in the candidate's mind to help them decide whether this is a good place to work or not. And remember that this is a two-sided thing. If you're applying for my job, I'm trying to decide if you're the right one, but you're also trying to decide if I'm the right one. So the degree to which we have interactions which reinforce our organization, that really inspire that candidate to continue with the process, that's the degree to which we're going to have success in getting the people that we want. So recruiting is not just a one-time thing. It's not just this person's in charge of that. Think about recruiting as that series of interactions with a lot of different people. The degree to which we can get all of our managers, all of our employees to understand that they're part of the recruiting team, that they make an impression on our candidates, That's the degree to which, if they do it right, if they take it seriously, if they're just nice and happy people, we're going to have some luck in getting people to enter into our organizations. The reactions that they have, or the goal that we have in terms of all of this recruitment, is to make sure that every applicant feels good about what they've done, that they have a positive feeling about this organization, and that they were treated fairly in this process. Now, it very well may be, it probably is the case, that we have a job where we're going to hire one person and we've got 100 applicants and we're bringing in 6 to talk to. So 99 out of those 100, 5 out of those 6 aren't going to be hired. But it should be our goal that all 100, as a process, as a result of going through this process of applying and maybe being recruited and interviewing, feel so good about this organization that all of them can see the possibility that they work here for the short term, for the long term. We want every one of them to feel good about the interaction with us, because it may be that you're not the one. You're one of the 99 that doesn't get hired. But hopefully, if you've had a good experience going through this process, the fact that we didn't hire you is not a bad thing, because the next job that comes open, we might hire you for. If you've got a lousy experience going through this process, you're not coming back for that next job. And the ones that we don't hire, we would like to come back if they're good people. So that goal exists there. Every applicant has a positive feeling about this organization. They were nice. They treated me respectfully. They were polite. They smiled a lot. They laughed a lot. They shook my hand. They commented me. They seemed to really care about my qualifications. The overall process that I went through, I feel like, was fair. Maybe I didn't like the outcome because I didn't get hired, but it was fair. I don't have any complaints about how they did it. And that takes us to 3 different types of fairness that we have to think about from our recruiting and our selection process. The first fairness is distributive fairness. And that, very simply, if we define it, is the belief that the outcome was fair. Now, what is the outcome of the hiring process? It is whether you got hired or not. So this one is really kind of tough to influence. You may, as a candidate, do everything right and still not get hired. And so in a sense, you're going to have a very poor distributive fairness because you didn't get hired. If you're hired, you tend to think that this was fair. The distribution of the outcomes was fair. If we're hiring 4 customer service reps and we're hiring 7 out of those however many people that apply will get hired, and they'll think that the process was fair, the outcomes were fair. But the non-7, the 93 out of 100, have the possibility of coming to the conclusion that the distribution of the outcomes, or the distributive fairness, was not fair. If you're hired, there's good distributive fairness. If you're not hired, there's not good, or there's poor distributive fairness. The only way that we can control this or influence this is to hire people. And we can't hire everybody. Not everybody do we want to hire. But even if there's 5 we'd like to, chances are pretty good we can only hire 1. So we don't really have any control over distributive fairness. But there are other kinds of fairness that we do have control over. The second one is procedural fairness. That's the belief of the candidate that the policies that influenced this process, and the process itself, and the procedures that we went through to do the hiring or to make that decision were fair. How do we influence this? Because you might not get hired, but you could still feel that the process was a fair one. Don't like the outcome, but I don't have any complaints about the process that I went through. How do we ensure procedural fairness? The easiest way to do that is to remember that they're human beings and we need to treat them with respect. We need to look at our process and make sure that nobody is asked to do something that other people aren't asked to do. That we respect their privacy. That we avoid any delays. Man, that's one of the biggest things is, I applied for this thing, I didn't hear anything about it for a month, and then suddenly I get this phone call while I've gone on to something else. Or I've applied, I've filled in all of the blanks that you need me to fill in, I've come in for an interview, and suddenly it's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard anything. That's really not fair to me. One way that we can prove our procedural fairness, or at least the perception of procedural fairness by our candidate, is to continue to talk to them about what's going on. Hey, just wanted to check in with you. We're still in the process of interviewing people. It's been a week since we interviewed you. We haven't forgotten about you. The fact that you haven't heard anything in a week is not a bad thing. We're still interviewing. Here's what our timeline is. We'll check back in with you later. Hey, are you still interested? Have you found something else? Cool. You found something else best to you. Still interested? Good. We're going to keep checking in with you to let you know what's going on. Avoiding delays. If we know that the person who has to approve this is going to be out in July, let's try to structure the timeline on this to where we can do it before she leaves, or that we can start it later and do it right after she gets back. Using job-related assessments. If you're hiring for an accounting position and I make you take a typing test, it's like, why do I have to do this? I don't type much as an accountant. I'm not going to write letters. Make sure that the things that we do are related to the job. Giving fair opportunity to perform. Imagine how frustrating it is and how unfair it seems if you're pumped up about this interview and you're brought in and you just really get the impression that they're going through the motions, that they're not interested. They've obviously already found their candidate and they have to say they interviewed 4 people. You think, you didn't give me a fair opportunity. Man, I could have really knocked this thing out of the park if you'd have given me a legitimate chance to. But you just kind of went through the motions. So make sure that we give everybody the same fair opportunity to perform, that we don't make up our mind ahead of time. And then another thing that we can do to improve the procedural fairness is to ask everybody the same questions. Now, to some extent, in an interview, and you'll find this out as you begin to develop interview questions and do your interviews, there are blanks that exist for some people that don't exist for other people. And you need to fill in those blanks. So there'll be times when you ask a candidate a question that you didn't ask anybody else because you didn't need to ask that question for anybody else. But the bulk of your interview questions need to be the same for everybody. Now, it's unlikely that candidate A is going to talk to candidate E after the fact and say, what'd they ask you, because they don't know each other, probably. But in the event that they do, if candidate A says, they asked me this question about ethics, and candidate E says, they didn't ask me that question, and candidate A says, well, I think that's the reason why they didn't hire me. That's not fair. You asked me the question, and you didn't ask her the question. Or you made me do this thing, and you didn't make them do this thing. Procedural fairness, or the perception of procedural fairness, goes way up if we're consistent with what we do, if we communicate well, if we have the same questions for everybody, if we have the same process for everybody. You don't have to interview with 3 people and she only has to interview with 1 person. Or you don't have to interview with 3 individuals where he has to interview with 5 people in the room at the same time. That's not the same process. And that is harder, in one sense, to interview with 5 people at once. It's a panel. It's an inquisition board. But it's also harder to find 4 different times in my schedule over the next week to come get dressed up and come down here to apply. If I can do it all the same day and everybody else did it all the same day, go from one to the next to the next to the next and be done with it, it's fair. The process is the same throughout. So we've got distributive fairness. That's the outcomes. Procedural fairness is the processes and the policies and the procedures and things like that. We have some control over that by doing it the right way. The third type of fairness is interactional fairness, where procedure looks at the things we do. Interactional fairness looks at the people who do those things. So it's the interpersonal treatment, the amount of information that they receive. So are we pleasant with one person and we're grouchy the next day and unpleasant with somebody else? Are we mean to somebody, or do we seem to be mean to somebody? Are we honest? Are we straightforward? Are we upfront? Do we show respect? Or do we exude warmth and appreciation and gratitude even? You know what? I really am, I'm really overwhelmed that you took the time to come and apply for our job. I mean, it shows us a lot of honor that you're interested in us. And I just want you to know that we really appreciate your time. We really value you and giving up the things that you had to give up to be here today. And we want you to have a good experience through this. Being informative. So the third type of fairness is the degree to which we are person, that we are human, that we are warm and caring and compassionate and so forth. What happens if we do one of these things badly? It's what we call the ripples or the spillover effects. The spillover effects are those unintended outcomes of something. Think about it from the perspective that maybe you go out to dinner or something and you have a bad experience. I mean, you tell everybody you know, right? Same thing with an interview. If you go and you interview with this and it goes really, really poorly, you're probably going to tell people you don't really want to interview there, you don't really want to work there because they don't treat you right. Most of the candidates who apply for an open job don't get it. We can only hire one person, and we might have 75, 100,000 people who apply. What happens with those people who don't get hired? Well, it depends on their experience. If they had to come and they had to sit in the lobby for a long time, I don't know why I thought of this, but I thought about the doctor's office. You make an appointment at 2:15 and you get there at 1:45 like they suggest, and at 4 o'clock you're still in the waiting room. You have to wait for extended periods of time. You're not happy, are you? And you're grumbling. It's like, I'm not coming back here, and I'm going to tell everybody to avoid Dr. So-and-so because you wait in the office for 3 hours, even though you had an appointment. Don't force our people to wait for pre-scheduled interviews. If you've got an appointment with them at 2 o'clock, by golly, have them in your office at 3 till 2. Don't have people involved in the process who are not prepared. If I'm interviewing somebody, I need to have seen their resume ahead of time. I need to have an idea of what I'm asking. Don't have people who are obviously distracted. I'm waiting for a phone call or people are knocking on the door. If I'm interviewing a candidate, let's go someplace where I'm not going to be interrupted, so that sends the signal to the candidate that I'm focused on them and them only. If they feel like the process was unfair, that's the procedural fairness thing. If they were made to not feel important or welcome, how's it going to impact? Not only will they probably not come and apply for another job, but if the experience is bad enough, they're going to badmouth our company as not just the process of hiring, but the company as a whole. It's like, okay, Sally's dress shop, you treated me horribly. I had a poor experience. So not only am I not going to apply for the next job that's open, I'm not going to buy a dress from you next week. And I'm going to tell my friends not to buy dresses from you next week. Will they still buy your products? Will they apply for another job? Will they tell people about the process? Those ripples, it's like dropping a pebble into a pond. I mean, the initial impact is very, very small, but those ripples come bigger and bigger and bigger. And in a large pond, one little pebble can create ripples that touch a great area beyond where that pebble actually went in. So we need to make sure that our processes are good, that we don't create those ripples. Or if ripples are created, they're good ripples. We treat somebody so well that even if they don't get the job, they go, man, I really respect that company. I have more respect for that company now than I ever did in the past. And yeah, I'm going to apply for them again. This was just a crazy thing. I didn't get hired for this one, but I'll get hired for the next one. I'm going to apply again. And I'm going to go and I'm going to start shopping there. And I'm going to use their services and buy their products. And I'm going to tell my friends about their particular company. So that's important. How do we manage this fairness? It boils down to stuff that you learned in kindergarten. You communicate completely, you communicate quickly in a timely manner, you keep people informed. One of the most frustrating things about anything you have to go through in life is those periods of time where you don't know what's going on. So the more we talk to our candidates, the more we keep them informed, the better they feel about the whole process. Showing people respect. Yes, sir, we appreciate you, sir. Mr. So-and-so, can I call you John? Okay, call me Mark, call me Steve, whatever the thing is. But respect is really, really important. One of the greatest needs that people have is to feel respected, like they have value and like they're appreciated and they have worth. And if we can communicate that during the process, men can go a long way to overcoming those poor processes. Maybe the exam that we gave malfunctioned, and that can create a bad impression. But if overall we've treated people with respect, they're willing to overlook those little things. And then the third thing that we can do to manage fairness is to be personal and to be friendly and to smile and to offer them a cup of coffee, to shake their hand, to stand, to walk with them. It's not like, okay, thank you for your time, that's where you go out. But walk them back to the office, to the door, shake their hand again before they leave, thank them for coming in. All those kinds of things. It's not hard to create a good, positive sense of fairness. Again, we may not have any control over the distributive fairness, but the procedural fairness and the interactional fairness, we have a lot of control over. It's not that hard. And if we can create a sense that it was fair, we can go a long way towards building a rapport with our candidates in our community so that we've got the option of getting good candidates in the future. This is not the only person we're going to have to hire over the next 10 years. We're going to need a steady stream of people coming in. The more fair we are, the more personal we are, the more friendly we are, the more we're going to have people interested in our jobs. So take chapter 7 out of the context of the book. Use that as you frame everything we're going to do throughout this semester as we create job descriptions, as we create interview questions and hiring matrices, as we look at our recruitment plans, as we do our interviews. Does it all tie into a process or support a process that our candidates are going to think was done well, it was done professionally, and it was fair? That's what we're trying to get. Hope you got something out of this chapter. You can take some ideas from it as you start thinking about job descriptions and interviews and things like that. And you can approach it from a way that you think about it as though you were the candidate being interviewed. If you can think about it from their perspective while you're designing it, it's probably going to end up being more fair. And I hope that you're ready and excited about the next couple of lessons when we start talking about job descriptions and building out job analysis processes and things like that, leading towards hiring that perfect candidate. Bye for now.